to ET Now Startup Central, India's first and only daily show dedicated to startups, technology and entrepreneurship. I'm Chandra Shrikant coming to you live from India's startup capital, Bengaluru. And like the last week, the news flow today was also dominated by Bitcoin. And in the latest, in a move that potentially makes this currency mainstream, Bitcoin derivative contracts have started trading on Chicago. And the price there is already at least $1,000 higher than the spot prices. So that should give you an indication of where people see Bitcoins going forward. But some people are saying it's a bubble. Some people are saying the price could just go up and up. We do not know where it's going to end. But we put together an interesting list of what you could potentially buy if you're willing to part with a Bitcoin, that is. My colleague Mubina did some number crunching and she joins us with more details.
Well, yes, we all do know that today is a momentous day when the Bitcoin is finally going to be listed on an exchange that is formally regulated. That's the CBOE. Come 18th, it's also going to be listed on the CME, two big exchanges in the United States. But what can one Bitcoin do today in India? Well, starting off, let's talk about a Louis Vuitton bag, which is at about 80,000 rupees in a mall in India. 0.07 Bitcoins, that's all you need to purchase a Louis Vuitton bag. Increase it a little further and you will be able to get, well, you'll be able to get an iPhone X at about 0.1 Bitcoin, considering the price is at about 1 lakh rupees. At half a Bitcoin, you'll get in a whole Maruti Desire. And if you want to up the stake a little more, at 1 Bitcoin, you'll be getting a Honda City, which is of course a petrol variant for 10 lakh rupees. 10 Bitcoins and you will get a 1 BHK in a Mumbai suburb. So I'm talking about a small little studio apartment, let's say in Andheri area, or even perhaps a little closer towards the south of Bombay. Another 40 Bitcoins and well, you will be able to treat yourself to a Rolls-Royce Phantom, which is of course one of the lower end Rolls-Royce cars, but nevertheless it's worth 4 crore rupees. So no complaints over there, especially if you've bought those Bitcoins like almost about 5-6 years ago. 200 Bitcoins will be able to get you one light private jet. While not convenient for far away distances, but at least for close by distances, 40 Bitcoins or rather 200 Bitcoins will do the trick. And finally, the ultimate dream, a luxury mansion at Beverly Hills with your own private pool and whatnot. Well, you need just about 330 Bitcoins for that one, because as per a conversion rate of about 65, you're talking about a Beverly Hills mansion which costs about $5 to $6 million. Well, 330 Bitcoins will do the trick.
Thanks for that, Mubina. But I wonder, with Bitcoins touching new highs every day, who would want to part with the Bitcoins they already have? But to get you a sense of, what Bitcoins mean from a taxation perspective, I mean, if you are in India and you own a Bitcoin, where do you really fall as far as the regulator is concerned? We're joined by Archit Gupta, the founder of ClearTax, right here on the show. Archit, thanks for talking to us. Before everything else, are you one of those lucky ones who actually bought a Bitcoin?
Actually, I don't hold Bitcoins, like full disclosure.
Okay, you don't hold Bitcoins. But Archit, what do you make of it? I mean, it's a very hazy area as far as regulation is concerned. RBI, has again issued a warning last week on cryptocurrencies, underlining its earlier warning. So we do not know where this will go from a regulation perspective. But today the government is saying that it might just set up a panel to look at regulation of Bitcoin. So, from a regulation perspective, though the Indian government still hasn't come out with rules on cryptocurrencies, what do you think is really driving this craze? Because you already have many Bitcoin exchange startups in India who are helping you buy, sell, save Bitcoins. Are you seeing a lot of startup founders, a lot of employees perhaps investing in Bitcoins, at least, earlier, before the huge surge began?
Right. So I think like in the early phase, it was all enthusiasts and people who understood cryptocurrencies, right? Like in the last, I believe like the last 2 months, 3 months, it's become very mainstream, right? Like you're hearing like many like people who we consider normals, like, right? Like people who don't think about cryptocurrencies, etc., trying to invest into Bitcoin, and like the crazy appreciation which Bitcoin has seen has brought in a lot of mainstream investors, if you will, or like a lot of tech employees even. Like I know of a lot of people here within ClearTax who are thinking of buying Bitcoin or already hold some positions in Bitcoin. And as you exactly pointed out, RBI and the regulator has continued holding its position of not offering legal clarity on virtual currencies or Bitcoin at all. And Further to that, like there's a lot of confusion, and like I think greed is driving the cycle. People are buying from the exchanges, and we are seeing a lot of interest in people trying to understand whether GST is applicable, whether income taxes are applicable, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a very interesting phase, like where people are trying to get in, thinking it's an early time.
Right. But Archit, from a taxation perspective, if I have bitcoins or if I hold bitcoins today, again, full disclosure, I don't hold anything. But for people in India who have bought bitcoins, where do they fall? I mean, because they are obviously sitting on huge gains if at all they decide to, sell something, trade something on the exchange. So do they get completely tax-free income from this? Where does this fall from a regulatory perspective, from a taxation perspective?
Right. So from the income tax perspective, right, the Income Tax Act is very, very clear. Like all the gains that you get from Bitcoin are going to be taxed. So I think that is the first thing which must be set out as very, very clear, that you will have to pay taxes on the money you make on selling Bitcoin, and if you have a gain. So that part is very, very clear. So there are few things which are still unclear, and we are awaiting clarity. I think both the finance ministry and the income tax department may take a view on this, but I'll give you a few aspects of it. So one is like under which head of taxation should this go into. So that part is very unclear right now. So some people are saying like whether it should be part of capital gain. Some people are saying like whether it should be part of other sources of income. So now a conservative view is that report this in other sources of income. Like it's just a classification of how income goes. So now in other sources of income, you will be taxed as per the income tax slab. Now income tax slab means that like when your income is below 5 lakh, that is 10%, 5 to 10 lakh, 20%, and above 10 lakh is 30%. So what that means is people will have to pay taxes as per slab when they report it in other income. That's the easiest sort of cleanest form of reporting this. Now, if you're holding Bitcoin and not selling it for gain, you have no taxes due. So you continue to, the asset is appreciating, but you have not sold it and you have not realized your gains. However, the pattern we are seeing is people are selling to realize gains, so that they sort of like, many people are afraid when Bitcoin prices fall. Second part, some people are taking the position that they will report it in as capital gains. Now in that, whether it's short-term gain, long-term gain, these are tough questions, because in terms of the holding pattern, right, whether you're holding it for 1 year, whether you're holding it for 3 years, these kind of things have not been clarified. A conservative view is you take it as 3 years, but like when you hold stocks or equities or mutual funds, equity-oriented mutual fund, people take 1 year as the holding period. Now, other interesting cases which have arose are like when you have losses in Bitcoin, when you have bought high and when are selling low, and that may happen to people. So in those kind of scenarios, also clarity has to emerge. The other part is since you hold an asset, when you're declaring assets and liabilities to the tax department, especially you're supposed to declare foreign assets, you're supposed to declare certain kinds of assets. Bitcoin has no clarity whether it ends up being a foreign asset, since it's a virtual currency. Lot of clarity awaited, heavy confusion, but a lot of interesting questions coming through.
Right. Archit, so finally, I mean, at this stage, are people paying taxes? And, you mentioned a lot of clarity expected in a lot of areas. But do you see the income tax department actually coming and sort of putting down these regulations? Because so far we haven't seen a concrete cryptocurrency policy coming from the government. So, and regulation always ends up following technology. So where do you see this heading in the coming weeks, in the coming months? Or, are we going to look at a scenario where they begin to take retrospective action, which will not go down too well with people? So where do you see this heading going forward?
Right. So from an income tax department perspective, Chandra, it is very clear as per the income tax law that you have to pay taxes on the gain you make. Now, how will losses be treated has a challenge, because if you have losses and you want to carry them forward or set off against other capital gain or set off against other income, that has interesting implications. So the government or the tax department may take a negative view on the set off of losses, but on the gain, the government will want you to give taxes, pay taxes, and even if no regulation, no clarity emerges, any gains you have, any profits you have, they will want taxes. So that part is absolutely clear. Now, your point is absolutely correct that the technology here is evolving so rapidly, and the regulation and the ministry have to follow this. But the sheer amount of volume of trading on Bitcoin and the sheer amount of interest in the cryptocurrency space has exploded, and people are seeing large gains. So I think government will be forced to take a position, like if this trend continues, or even if the trend holds at the stage that it is. It's like massive inbound interest in this space and this concept. And so I think the government will have to react to this in some way or form, at least from a taxation perspective. Legal tender or otherwise, I don't know.
Okay, Archit. On that note, thanks so much for joining us on Startup Central to really take us through, where things stand from a taxation perspective. So hopefully the lucky ones who already have Bitcoins, who are planning to buy, will be listening. But on that note, thanks, Archit. And we move away to another interview that we have on the show for you. We were at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad recently, where we caught up with the CEO of T-Hub, Jay Krishnan. Now remember, T-Hub is fast becoming the most sought after startup incubator in India. It's already the largest in terms of size, in terms of the number of startups. We spoke to Jay to really understand what sets T-Hub apart and what he makes of this Bangalore versus Hyderabad question as far as startup ecosystem is concerned.
When I look back at our journey, 2015 when we started T-Hub, it was a true Hyderabad story. 2016 we became a national story, and like you correctly said, in 2017, to the testament of the first daughter and the advisor to the president, we've now become an international story. So it's been very exciting. I think the second thing that's happened is that on account of GS being in Hyderabad, at least for the next few days, the global startup spotlight is in this wonderful city, and that's very exciting because when you think of India, you generally think of Bangalore as a startup destination, right? So at least people begin to notice that India is truly emerging and every city is developing its own startup ecosystem.
Right. And if I look at it, T-Hub has really scaled up in the last 2 years. So again, what is the way forward? Do you, think, are there concerns that perhaps it's become a problem of plenty? I mean, many startups in many different areas now, converging at T-Hub. Where do you see the future going forward for the incubator? And secondly, based on your track record so far, have you seen startups leaving T-Hub, go on and scaling up? Have you been able to track their progress after the incubation phase?
Sure. It's a great question. On the first account, which is the scale at which we operate, and it's literally, I keep telling people, it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? There's so much coming in. And the best way to tackle that is not focus on the fact that 90% of the startups will fail. It's always been the case. We're not going to fight that battle. But what will be interesting is when we look at India and look at 90% of 100 startups, which means 10 startups will succeed. India has the beauty of 90% of 1,000 startups, right? So 100 will succeed and make that 10,000, so 1,000 will succeed, and that journey continues. So we are excited about that, and that's not going to change. The second part of it, in the last year, in the last 2 years, we've touched about 1,110 startups through our physical incubator, virtual incubator, corporate innovation, the international programs, etc. And the beauty of that is that we are now becoming an epicenter for startups across the country to come to us, and international startups to come to India and discover India through our gateway. And likewise, Indian startups going outside and discovering new ecosystems through us. So I think those three pillars allow us to operate independently, and ultimately we are building our own platform and engines that allow us to operate at a very in fifth gear and automatically, so it's not very human intensive. And that is also something we preach to our startups. A, it's okay to fail, and B, can you self-sustain? We are today a self-sustaining company, and the government plays a great role in supporting us in kind and not in cash. And I think that's something that every state should emulate and figure out its own process of curating its state.
Right. The second part, in terms of the progress, the metrics, or
So I think we've had currently we have 147 startups in the incubator. We have about 50 startups in the corporate innovation program, and they're all mostly from outside. We have half a dozen startups in the international programs, and all this is in the steady state. In the last 2 years, we've had 350 startups roughly through the incubator. Of that, more than 290 are still alive. We are constantly in touch with them. We help them. So the idea is simple, which is the incubator is the early stage that adds genesis to the startup to take off. But once they take off, they've got to figure out that their script is their own, and they've got to go out there and figure it out by their own. That doesn't mean that we don't stay in touch with them and help them. It just means that the birds left the nest, and once in a while these birds come back. So, so for us, I think the engagement with the startups will always be there. It's just that we won't be hand-holding and spoon-feeding them as much as we did when we were in the incubator. So in our language, we call them graduates, the graduate and leave. And they come back for our workshops, they come back for our events. In fact, 47 of our startups are here at GES. Of the 5 in Uber Exchange, 2 are actually graduates, they've left. So we still stay immersed with them.
On that note, we'll take a break at this point, but do come back because we have 2 very interesting stories for you. An app that the BBMP has launched that will help you fix Bangalore's roads. And second, we also tell you about a startup that wants to make a big dent in the B2B space as far as catering is concerned, corporate catering is concerned. Come back to Startup Central. Welcome back to Startup Central. As promised, the first story after the break is an app that helps you fix Bengaluru street literally. Now, Bengaluru's civic body BBMP has launched an app called Fix My Street. So the next time you find someone complaining about a pothole or a missing street lamp or even garbage piling up on the road, what you really need to do is download this Fix My Street app, flag it off to BBMP and then hold them accountable if they do not fix the problem within a specified time limit. Here's a look at how the Fix My Street app works. So the next time, perhaps before tweeting or posting something on Facebook, you could use this app to flag off concerns to BBMP.
Today we have launched BBMP Fix My Street app. It's a report on civic community issue. So the moment there is a problem faced by the citizen, he takes a picture on his mobile and forwards it to the concerned engineer, who is the first person to attend the problem, and by which the problem, and he has to certify when the problem is going to be addressed. So now the accountability of the local engineer, local corporator, and the elected representative will be there.
Is basically keeping 3 issues in mind. As far as the garbage issues are concerned, it is 24 hours. Street lights will be 48 hours, and the potholes will be about a week's time. So this is the timeline that we have fixed.
We don't know if it will be fixed, but I think the least we can all do as citizens of the city is to ensure that we flag it off to the right authority. But on that note, let me end the show then with our Budding Stars segment. And the startup that we are looking at is one in the B2B food tech space. Now, food tech has been a dangerous area of sorts for startups because of poor unit economics. A lot of startups in this space not doing too well in the last 2 years. But here's a startup that started out as B2C. It saw that it was burning way too much cash and pivoted to a B2B model, which is actually making profits for them. We're talking about HungerBox. Take a look at how the startup works.
We have covered a lot of food apps on the show, a lot of B2C apps that all of us order food from. But there is an interesting startup in the area of B2B. They help companies really manage their cafeterias and in a very digitized way. It is backed by Growth Story. I have with me the co-founder of the startup HungerBox. Thank you so much for taking out the time and talking to us on ET Now. Glad to come by to an office canteen and do this shoot with you. But tell us, B2B food tech, we've not really heard many companies be a part of it because you have a lot of companies that manage canteens themselves. So, how did you land on this idea and how has it worked for you?
Yeah, so we started our journey doing B2C food tech, and we did it. We are the oldest company to have done this in India. But then, over a period of last 6-8 years, we have realized that space has got overcrowded, and that made us explore the B2B side of it. And what we see in the B2B side of it is that this is an even larger market. It's a market waiting to be disrupted, a market that needs a lot of food technology to improve employee efficiency, to improve the entire ecosystem, and that's what got us started.
But in terms of companies that you have, you're mentioning some names, about I think 65 companies that you sort of, and it's been a little over a year that you've been in the place. So what is working for you when you go out to these companies? Why would they let you manage their canteens when they have been doing it, by their own for a long time? These are established companies. So what has really worked for you also?
So what has worked for us is the fact that there had been a very crying need in all these large companies for someone to help them manage their F&B services, right? And do it through technology, so that it is transparent, it is scalable, it is manageable for companies of this size and scale, right? And in us, the companies saw a great balance of a company which has deep technology, supported with a lot of operations and support. So we have that combination. We started our first cafeteria here itself. This cafeteria that you see today is the first digital cafeteria that we started. And after showing this to a lot of our clients, everyone loved what we had done through the use of technology, and they wanted a piece of that in their offices. And pretty much sales became quite simple for us. We pretty much went to each and every company henceforth, and they loved the fact that we are disrupting this space through technology and wanted to partner.
Got it.
We'll see how HungerBox fares in the coming months, but I guess B2B is the model that's working for them. But on that note, we're completely out of time in this edition of Startup Central. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to ET Now for news and updates.